your school and pros and cons, and what should I prepare in order to have a successful application. And also finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about the current global situation. Of course, I'm not an expert here, but I hope to give you some insight here. So just since later Dr. Yuan will talk about Hong Kong, so I'll give a brief introduction of the speakers today. I'll start this talk, and so I did my PhD at Harvard in the United States, so hopefully I can give you some information about what I know about the United States. And then Dr. Yuan, of course, is Hong Kong PFS awardee. So she did her PhD at Chinese University of Hong Kong, our neighbor, and then she went to Stanford University for postdoc before joining CityU EE. And we work in very different research areas. I work in integrated photonics and nanotechnology, and Dr. Yuan is an expert in deep learning and medical imaging. Of course, if you have questions related to this specific topics, you are also welcome to talk to us. Okay, so for me, I'd like to talk about these 5 questions. So what does a PhD life look like in the US, and the reasons for pursuing a PhD and a PhD in the US, and what should I prepare? And I said this already, should I get a master's degree first, and also the current challenges. So I'd like to start from what does a PhD life look like in the US, okay? So I think overall, the graduate school life is fun, I think. This is a fun picture, right? We were doing fishing, that was on the sea. But of course, not everybody is happy. And so I think overall it's fun if you can satisfy the following conditions. The first one is that if you have a nice advisor, right? And that's quite important. And but not too nice, I would say. I've seen really nice advisor that actually doesn't really even talk to their students, well, or only talk about non-research stuff that would probably make your life too easy. But I think it is very important to have a nice advisor, and also you'll be doing PhD for many years, right? And you do have some income, but not much. Right? So if you're okay with that, then it's also fun. And then thirdly, I think in the United States, very likely you will not be getting very good food. And so this is the most common Chinese food in the United States, so-called General Tso's chicken, which you will not find in China, right? So about in the middle of nowhere, I think that's quite a specific problem or point for the United States. I'm showing the map here. This is the election map, but I think the point is not about whether it's a blue state or a red state. The important thing here is that a lot of the very good universities in the US, they are not in big cities, right? Not in cities like Hong Kong. So very likely, a lot of these very good universities, they have a so-called university town. So that entire town is basically a university, and it could be anywhere. And I can name a few. For example, University of Illinois, right, known as UIUC. It's in a town called Urbana, and in the middle of corn land, right? And of course, it's a really good university. And so I think the life could be a bit boring, you would say, but I'll talk about what you can get. So before talking about application, I'd like to give you a bit more points about what PhD really is. Right? What are you expecting when you're getting into a PhD career? I think some of you might have seen this comic or cartoon before, but I'm just to quickly show you this. So if you imagine a circle, this is a circle that contains all human knowledge, right? And then of course you are not going to learn all these knowledge that human being has, but you are going to grow your knowledge. Right? So when you finish your elementary school, you know a little bit, right? And then when you finish high school, you know a little bit more. And then when you go to university, you have a major, right? For us, we are EE major. So not only you learn a little bit more universally, you also gain a specialty, right? So there's something that you know better than others, right? And then once you do a master degree, that deepens the specialty, right? And then normally in your first year of PhD, you will learn several courses, right? So, and then you'll read a lot of papers, research papers, that what other people are doing. So that reading these papers take you to the edge of human knowledge, right? That's along this direction, you know basically what human knows, right? And then at that time you are at the boundary, and then what you can do is that you can push the boundary for a few years. Right? That's what a PhD is. So you try to really find out things that were not known to people, right? So you push the boundary for a little bit, right? The boundary gives way, and that achievement you have done is called a PhD, right? So this is different from a master, right? Remember what master is. You're not creating new knowledge. You are learning what people have discovered. But for PhD, you're discovering something that nobody knows before. Right? Now, of course, the world looks different to you at this point, right? Because you think you have pushed the boundary for a lot, and I think that's pretty cool. Right? And in my opinion, it's the most exciting part of PhD. Right? You are essentially along this direction. You know better than anybody else in this world. So that's pretty cool. And but of course, you shouldn't forget about the big picture. Right? This is a whole human knowledge, and then you're only here. Right? And in reality, I think it's probably even smaller, right? Considering how many PhDs are there in the world. So you might ask yourself these three philosophical questions, right? But I do feel that this is a very exciting part of doing a PhD, and it's a unique process that is not easily seen in other fields. So we talk about the fun part, right? We talk about the exciting part, but I don't want to make this as a propaganda of graduate school. Right? So I think in reality, it can be quite lonely and repetitive. For me, I work in the area of what's so-called nanophotonics. Right? So what we do is that in day one, we would dress up. This is a clean room for device fabrication. Right? So you would dress up, and then you go into the clean room and you make the device. Right? You fabricate the device, and then we work on optics. So day two, you would take your device, go to the optics lab. This is a lot of optical fibers. We do the measurements in the optical lab. Now, day 3, you go back to the clean room and fabricate another round of device. And day 4, you go back for measurement. Right? So this goes on and on and on and on until about day 2000, and then you can graduate. Right? So, of course, it's not that repetitive, but a lot of time you're doing quite repetitive things. Right? So that's somewhat is in some sense the reality of a PhD life. It might be, although you're still in a school, right? You're still in a university. It could be a very different experience from anything else you have experienced before. Right? So this is what PhD life could really look like. And the other thing is it doesn't really take you to academia, right? Normally you think most fresh PhD candidate goes to graduate school expecting to become a professor afterwards. From my own experience, it varies a lot, but on average, I don't have the full statistics here, but on average, I would think it's about 10 to 20%, I think, that actually in the end goes to becomes a professor. It may not be that they cannot. It may not be that they don't want to anymore after a PhD. So, but this is the I think this is the reality. So where do they go? It actually can be anything after a PhD. I think a big portion of the PhD graduates go to industry, right? And that's also part of why this society needs PhD, right? Even in industry, you need R&D sectors, right? So you can either go to big enterprise, or a lot of PhDs start their own companies, right? So that's one route. There are more. You can go to finance. I know a lot of people doing finance after graduate school. And there are more. Could be high school teacher. That's also possible. Not many, but possible. Government. So really, I think it doesn't directly take you. Of course, there is a path there, but I think it wouldn't be a good idea to say that if I go to PhD, I will definitely become a professor. I think that's not exactly the case. Okay. So I think that's my understanding or thinking about PhD. So just to summarize on that part, here are a few takeaways on PhD. First thing is it can be quite tough, frustrating, and sometimes lonely. It doesn't directly take you anywhere, and but it's a solid experience to have. So here are 3 things that I think a PhD can really give you. Okay, so I've talked about a lot of negative things, but I do think these are really, really unique things. The first one is that you're going to independently leading a project that nobody knows how to do it. Right? So this is a very unique thing. And in fact, going back to the previous slides, I talk about different routes after PhD. Right? I actually have a lab mate who went to finance after PhD. He was like me. He was EE PhD, had nothing to do with finance, but then he became very successful in the finance industry. And then recently he's recruiting for his team. And then he specifically mentioned to me that he is recruiting PhD graduates. So I think this is experience that only when you do a PhD you will get. Right? it's not something that your advisor really tells you how to do it. But in the end, a lot of times is that you tell your advisor what to do next. Right? So you a lot of time you will be surprised at how little your advisor knows. Even for big professors in well-renowned universities, you will still be surprised at how little they know. So that's the first thing. The second thing is be really good at a specific topic, not just superficial understanding. Right? So when we did our undergrad, we learned a lot of courses. A lot of times we only know somewhat know about it, but not really know about it. Right? So, but of course it's a very specific topic. But still, this is I think this is a very good experience to have. Of course, you will also along the way you could learn a lot of interesting skills that you may or may not need in the future. But I think the learning curve is the important thing. Right? So I think after doing a PhD, you wouldn't be scared by some skill you don't have, because, for example, in the undergrad, you might call learning Python or learning Java as one like task. But I think during the PhD, you would most of the time you would self-learn these skills, and that's something that you wouldn't get from other experience. Okay, so this is one thing that's might be quite interesting is machine shop. So basically, drill making things makes you look like a technician, but a lot of the PhD are actually making things by themselves, and this is another skill, right? If you are a mechanical engineer, you might think this is expertise for that major, but in reality, you could be a physics PhD, and then you're doing these things for your project. So I think these are the things that I think are very exciting for me at least. So about doing a PhD. Okay. So before you apply, right, I think you need to really think about these questions before you decide whether you should apply for a PhD. The first thing is I think you should be truly passionate about the subject. I'm not saying that the subject of EE, it should be the subject that you really want to do research. For example, power electronics, or it could be even more specific. Right? So you need to really be passionate about the subject, right? Not just because everyone else is doing a PhD or doing this subject, because this is something you're going to work with in the next many years. Right? And if you're excited about trying new things, both during and after PhD, then I think it's a very good route to take. And the last thing, I think it's very practical. It's maybe you think it's too practical, but I think it's also very important, is you really need to be okay with spending 6 or more years on it. And I know different people have different situations, right? Like family or whatever. So this is a constraint in the end of the day. Yes. So I think if you're okay with these 3 things, then I'd say that you should try. If you do have these 3 things, I think you should try. Okay. Okay. So that was my understanding of PhD. Of course, if you have questions, we can discuss later, and I'll spend maybe next 5 to 10 minutes talk about the preparation for PhD application. Okay. So these are my experience from these few things. Of course, I personally applied to the U.S. graduate schools. At Harvard, I also was, I was not officially, of course, involved in the admission process, but I do get some insider information gathered during my time there. And then also, I'm also taking PhD students here at CityU, right? So I gather all these information from these experience. Of course, it's very limited samples, so only somewhat statistically meaningful, but still, I think it's, I'm telling you things that I think is correct, okay? So the first thing I would like to tell you is the various admission schemes in different universities in the US. You might see different things. The first scheme, the first thing I would like to talk about is the different way of deciding who to admit. Okay, so there are different universities taking different schemes, and you might have heard about this admission committee. So in certain university, I think the examples are MIT and Stanford, the admission committee has a very large power in deciding which students to take. And that means individual professors have very little power. Even if that professor really likes you, if you cannot pass the committee, then basically it wouldn't work, okay? And then the other opposite is that the advisor fully decide. Right? Advisor, later Dr. Yuan will tell you that here in Hong Kong is mostly working that way, that professors would decide. A lot of the others are working in a kind of mixed situation. That means the final decision will be made by the committee, but each professor will be able to recommend. And in most cases, unless the candidate is really bad, then the professors still have a pretty large power of deciding who to take. Okay. And then once you get offered, there are a few different kind of offers. The first one is called scholarship. Not everybody will get a scholarship. This is actually quite rare. But it doesn't mean that you need the scholarship to get salary or to get income. So even for scholarship, it's usually only 1 year. There are exceptions, like Stanford has this Stanford PhD fellowship, which is 3 years, but that's very rare. And in most universities, from year 2 on, you're going to be supported by your advisor as a research assistant, right? So the so-called RA-ship. And this is because you're doing research in the end of the day, right? And you're part of the research project of your advisor. Right? So normally, whichever way it takes, from year 2 on, you're going to be supported by research assistant. But for certain universities, especially those decided by committee, you'll get 1 year scholarship, so that basically the first year you're not bounded to any professors. So that year you can do a rotation, right? You can do so-called rotation. You can work with a few different professors before you decide what to do. Right? And of course, for the universities that the professor basically admits you, so that you're expected to work with that professor, then you're going to, from day one, you're going to be supported by research assistant. Right? And in some public universities, you might also get TA-ship. That means you're going to, basically your salary comes from doing TA. And if that has to go on forever, then that's also a pretty large burden for the students. So in the end, you need to look at what the actual situation is. And there's one last form which is called AD, admission. Basically, it's only admission without money. And if that's it, then I usually wouldn't recommend doing that, going for just admission. Of course, it's possible that you go there, you find a good advisor that wants to support you, then he's going to give you research assistant. But then there's no guarantee there, and but there's just one exception. I think for MIT, they only give AD, they only give admission, and when they give admission, it's fully decided by the committee. And then once you get admission, you start to contact the professors, and then the professor will only reply you when you get admission, because they don't have power for the admission. So they only see that you get admitted, then they start to discuss with you, and then if both of you like each other, then before you go there, you will get support. So I think that's the only exception here, but there are different schemes, and most of the, I think one way or another, most of the PhD students do get supported. Actually, I haven't known anybody does the PhD like supported by himself. I haven't heard of any of that case. Okay. So there are many things that could affect your application results, right? In the end of the day, we talk about a whole application package, a whole package, and it includes many different things. So I'm listing all of these different things that can affect the results. Of course, the brand of your undergrad university matters, right? Where you're coming from, your GPA, that's of course it's important. Research experience, publications, and recommendation letters. And also, a lot of time you would contact with the potential advisor. Right? So whether you have a good contact would also affect. And of course, TOEFL, GRE, IELTS, these could also affect. And any other things that could help. So there are really a lot of things that can affect. So the next, I would like to say a few words about my understanding of these different things. Overall speaking, I think the graduate school admission process is more or less a random process. Of course, if you have a stronger package, then more likely you're going to get more offers than having a weaker package. But that's statistically speaking. Right? For individuals, you would see your result will be within a certain range, but with a large standard deviation. So for myself, I got offers from Harvard, from Stanford, from Yale, from Carnegie Mellon. Didn't get offer from MIT, Princeton, Berkeley, Purdue, Michigan, Maryland. Why? I don't know. Right? So that's why I'm saying that it's more or less a random process. It's more or less a random process. But still, if you can make your package stronger, then statistically speaking, you're going to get a better result. Right? So I'm guessing that if I do this one more time, I'll probably get different offers. But I think the good thing about this application system is that it's a mutual selection process. Right? So you would apply for many different universities, and then some of them will give you an offer. So in the end, you hopefully still get into one that you like. So going back to all these things, I think my takeaway is that all of these factors on their own can be completely irrelevant or unimportant. I've seen cases of students getting into very, very good programs not without all of them. I'm saying without one of them. Okay, so from very normal universities with very with not very good GPA, I've seen cases, a lot of cases, getting into very good PhD programs, right? But of course, you can't be in the case that you don't have any of them, right? So in the end of the day, you need something that can stand out from other applicants. So I think individually, all of these factors can be unimportant. Therefore, all of them should be taken seriously if you can. Should be taken seriously if you can. For myself, I actually think that contacting potential advisors are very important. All of the offers I got are from professors that I more or less contacted. And so some people say that you read their papers and then ask them a technical question. I think that's not necessary at all. It's wasting everybody's time because as an undergrad, what can you know about it, right? And professors don't expect you to know about their research deeply, right? You should know broadly, but you wouldn't know too much, right? So if you just ask them a technical question, I think it's wasting everybody's time. So, and they know what you want, right? And they want to recruit the best students. So there's nothing wrong with just contacting them directly and make it clear about your intention. So, but you need to be serious about your letter. Right? I've seen here as well. I've seen students. I've seen students emailing me, wanted to be PhD students, but then the 2 paragraphs have different fonts. So that means you're copy pasted from somewhere else, right? And probably to another professor. It's not a big deal, but it shows your attitude. Right? If you didn't even put effort in your email to me, then why should I care about you? So I think when you draft the letter, it should be done quite seriously. Now, I think this is the last point about this contacting advisor is that I think the very good thing in the letter is that you can emphasize your strengths and explain what might be doubtful, right? In your package, there are things that people don't understand. For example, your university, they might not even heard about it, right? But you can tell them, right? For example, I think a lot of you think that you may not be able to get a good offer if you apply for PhD. I think that's not the case. I think I don't think you'll get any disadvantage when applying from CityU. We're good enough universities, but of course, not everybody have heard about it. But you can tell them, right? I'm from CityU. This is ranked whatever 50 in the world university, number whatever in Hong Kong. Right? RE department is one of the best department in the university. You can tell them about it, right? And sometimes they don't understand how your GPA works. Right? What does 3.6 mean in CityU? Then give them some sense of what that means, right? The ranking, the percentage, something like that. So, and you should attach a good CV, right? A good CV is extremely important. You should talk about, should put whatever you think is the most important into your CV. So even in the programs where the committee has the final say, it could still help. So if the professor really wants you, then the committee usually wouldn't block him from admitting you. So going back to the previous these different factors, again, I think I've seen students who does not have part of these, right? And I've seen professors that really don't care about some of these factors. Like for my previous advisors, he never look at TOEFL or GRE because he himself didn't do very well. So he thinks it's completely irrelevant, right? So this can be unimportant, and you don't really need research experience. Just a very good GPA can do, right? And you don't need a very good GPA if you have very good research experience, you have publications. So I think what is really important is that you should think which part of it you can try to make yourself stand out from others, right? And that is very important. If everything is average, then it doesn't make you stand out, right? But if you, for example, have a very good research experience, have publications, then that can offset other things, other things. So you really need to think about how you can make your package look like a good one, right? Okay. And I think that's the last page of comment on the graduate school application is, I think advisor is much more important than the brand of the university. So I think this is something that I hope you could keep in mind. In the end of the day, when you look for jobs, people, if you're from a PhD program, people really look at your publications and your recommendation letters. So, and your letters are going to come from your advisor. So that's really much more important. It's not true for undergraduate and master, I think. But for PhD, the advisor is much more important than the brand of the university. And also, not only you should try to find an advisor that can do good research, but also needs to be a good person. Right? So, because it's someone that you need to deal with in the next 6+ years. You can't just stand with this guy or this professor. Right? So this is someone you really need to live with, work with, and so that's another thing. Right? So before you contact the professor, you can also, or after, you can also ask people from the group. Most of them have a group website, right? You can just email them about and ask for help. And normally they wouldn't say bad words about their advisor, but you can feel. Sometimes they don't reply. Normally, if the advisor is really nice, they will reply very quickly. And so that's another piece of advice. Okay, so I think this is second last question I would like to address is that I know a lot of you are considering getting a master degree. The question here is that should I get a master degree first? Okay, the reason I have this first here is because, of course, you can get a master degree, but I think it's a different story if you would like to get a master degree before going to PhD, and I think that's a different thing. So generally speaking, you do not need to get a master degree before you go to PhD, okay? Especially in the US. In the US, the duration of your PhD is usually regardless of whether you have a master degree or not. I have lab mates that has a master degree, and he took the same amount of time as others. Unless your master degree is is really relevant, which is usually not the case. So that's not the reason to do a master degree first. And most of the master program in the US are taught only, right? So only course based, 1 or 2 years. So I think the most important thing here is that you can go back to that criteria and think about whether it really helps your package doing this master program, right? For example, if you think your GPA is not good enough, then maybe you can do a master program in a better known university, get a good GPA that kind of proves your ability, right? And so unless it helps your package, the 6 criteria, then you can do a master degree first. And I know in Hong Kong, now we don't have that, and we still have that MPhil program, but we're not really recruiting many of these MPhil. For MPhil, I know a lot of MPhil that then later go for PhD. That's a different story, because in MPhil you can do a lot of research, right? And that can boost your package on that research part. But if you're just doing a taught program, then it doesn't really help in boosting your program. So, but of course, if you're not intended for PhD, or you have not decided, you would like to decide at a later time, you still want to have some time to get some more experience, and in the end of the day, you think it's more likely that you go to industry, then getting a master degree, I think, is a good idea. And one important reason is that if you don't have a degree in the US, it's usually difficult to get a job there. So it's possible, but it's much easier if you have a degree there. So I made a table here just to compare, and so a lot of difference, right? So I think it's kind of fundamentally different doing a PhD or Master of Science, and the nature is different. One is research, the other is course learning. Duration is very different, right? And the funding for PhD, you do have some income, do have some stipend, about 25K to 35K US dollar per year. It's enough for living. You don't need to worry about your living, but it's definitely not going to make you rich. For master program, it's usually self-funded, and of course it's quite expensive, but it's a relatively short of time, and then you do have the prospect of going to Facebook, Google, and get a pretty good salary after graduation. And the outlet, I think, you can't become a professor if you don't have a PhD. I think that's one thing, right? But on the other hand, as I mentioned, doing a PhD is not a sufficient condition to become a professor. And a lot of PhD graduates actually don't. Right? And for master, if you stop there, then have to go to industry, or of course you can go for a PhD afterwards. So I think fundamentally speaking, these two programs are different, are very different. Okay. So finally, I think I should probably close quite quickly. The current challenges. Right? So I just put these slides together as also as a discussion. I wouldn't say that what I said is completely correct. It's just my thoughts. Right? So there are a few. This year is a very challenging year. There are a lot of different things going on. Right. So we have the coronavirus. Right? This is I just got from Google the total cases. Right? And you see that a lot of the countries that we normally go for PhD are the situation is not very good, right? Even recently in Europe is not very good. This Canada looks small, but considering the population, it's also not very small, right? So this is something you do need to consider. I think for a lot of you, I've seen that still in the early years, I think that might be okay. But if you're year 4, this is something that you should consider. Right? It's not going to normalize. I don't think it's going to normalize before end of 2021. But afterwards, I think we're more or less will go back to the normal situation. And then, of course, we have the geopolitical situation right now. Right? I think even when COVID-19 is over and when Biden will be the president, foreign students, especially Chinese, right, including Hong Kong people these days, right, are likely going to face more challenges than before. Right? We are, if you know about applying for visa, there's something called check. Right? So this is something that for certain majors, if you're doing EE, very likely you're going to get checked. And normally it's 1 month. Sometimes it could be much longer than that to get your visa. So that means you might need to prepare for not being able to return home every year. So that might be the new normal in the future, right? And there might be more restrictions in the projects. If it's very sensitive military projects, they might have more restrictions. I've recently heard about the investigation, prolonged investigation at the immigration points, and also the immigration policy, like OPT. This is the visa that allows you to work after you graduate in the US. H-1B, this is work visa, green card, all of these, we don't know, but it could become harsher, right? It could become harsher. Right? So I think there definitely are going to be more challenges in the next few years, but it shouldn't block the majority of students from going to the US. So some professors, because of their projects might be sensitive, they may admit less students from China, but not much. I don't think it's going to affect too much the total amount of students being admitted. I don't think it's going to be changed too much. And also the overall research strength, you can't find another place that has overall strength better than United States. So I would say that I still encourage you to apply if you can, and if you are not afraid of these things. And it's workable, right? These are challenges, but they wouldn't stop you from doing a PhD. So I still encourage you if you think that's the best for you. Of course, you should also keep in mind that there are also tons of excellent universities elsewhere. On the previous page, I was saying on the overall basis, US is much better than any other countries or regions. But on the individual university or advisor level, it may not be. Right? There are excellent universities, professors, Canada, UK, Switzerland, other part of Europe also very good. Specifically, I think Switzerland, like EPFL, ETH, really, really good universities. Dr. Yuan will talk about Hong Kong, Japan, Australia. I've seen many cases of students going there, become very successful, and become later also very successful. So this is my final word, right? Is advisor is more important than the brand of university and where you go. So I think you should also keep your mind open about it. So that's all I would like to say, and I think if you have questions right now, you can type in the chat box, or you can ask if you're here. And but we can also answer the question after Dr. Yuan finish her talk. Okay. So we have one person said would like to apply for big data Master of Science. Is that a question, or if you have any question, you can also type in. more about it. Right? So you can also ask about applying for MSc. That's fine. And, any other questions for the moment? Okay. If not, then I will ask Dr. Yuan to talk first, and then we can do a Q&A afterwards. Okay.
Good evening, everyone, and I'm Yixuan Yuan, and I am assistant professor in our department. And today I will spend very little time to introduce the graduate study in application in Hong Kong. And so this is outline for today's introduction. And so I would first introduce the PhD application in Hong Kong and also the Hong Kong PFS application. And after that, I will illustrate a little bit about the MSc application. And to begin with the PhD application in Hong Kong, I would like to share my own experience. And actually, I conduct my PhD degree in the Chinese University of Hong Kong with Hong Kong PFS. And during the 2012 to 2015. And actually, when I finished my bachelor degree, I plan to conduct my PhD to do the research. And but however, I'm a girl and I didn't want to go very far away from my home. So I just applied the university in Hong Kong and in Singapore. And actually, at that time, I only contact Hong Kong U, CityU, PolyU, CityU, HK, and NUS. Someone may ask me which professor you contacted in CityU, but actually I searched online and I didn't find that one. And after my application, I received the offer from the CUHK, including the Department of Computer Science and also the Department of Electronical Engineering. And I also obtained the offer from NUS. And finally, I just choose the offer from the CUHK because I applied that department for the Hong Kong PFS. To be noted here is that if you want to apply Hong Kong PFS, you only have two options. You can only select two departments as your choice. And so although I conduct my PhD study in Hong Kong, I think I have very fruitful experiments. I went to Stanford for 6 months research exchanges, and I went to Milan, Chicago, Seattle for top conferences. And I won Young Scientist Award in Hong Kong Institute of Science, and I won Best Paper Research Award and the Best Conference Papers. And after I finished my PhD degree, I directly go to Stanford for 1 year postdoc, and then I just joined in CityU in 2018. And I want to mention here is that although you may just did the PhD in Hong Kong, but you also have a lot of chances. For example, especially in the recent 2 years, and many of my friends just go back to Hong Kong, and they just applied, they obtained their PhD degree in Hong Kong, but they directly went to the Hong Kong UST, CUHK, Hong Kong U, and NUS as assistant professor. So I think the most important thing for you during the PhD study is the publication. So please focus on your research and find the best advisor. It is much more important compared with the university. And of course, some students just want to go to the industry. And my friends who also obtain PhD degree in Hong Kong, they may directly go to the Facebook, Google, and Tencent. So this is my experience. And in order to do the PhD in Hong Kong, I think the most important thing is to identify your interests. especially in our department. In order to know the research areas of one professor, please directly go to the department website. For example, in our department, our research area ranges from the electronics to the computer vision. So the area are quite wide. So please identify your interest first. And after that, please contact the potential professors. Since right now you are in Hong Kong, you can directly send email to the professors, or you can even conduct some preliminary research with them so that you can basically understand what they are done and what's your interests. And after that, I think the most important thing that if you have already received some positive feedback from the professors, you can directly submit application through the website. And also, please notice that I would suggest you to continuously contact the professor, because if you have already decided to do a PhD study and the most important thing for you is the research, right? And I would suggest you to do the project as soon as possible, which may lay a very good research background for your further career. And right now, you have already finished your part in the professor part, right? And in our department, you also need to be interviewed by our department. But that part, we major focus on your interaction with other people. So your pronunciation, your basic ideas. So this is relatively easy, actually, I want to say, if you can get a support from one professor. So after you interview the department, and the most important thing is to be patient and to conduct some preliminary research and then to get an offer. So let's see what you can get if you study a PhD in CityU. So first, every month you will get a stipend with Hong Kong dollars 17,500. And if you have already passed your qualifying examination, your salary may increase to 18,200. Except this basic monthly stipend, you may also have the option to apply the research tuition scholarship. So for this one, I think it is very competitive, because if you have some publications, then you have a very high possibility to be awarded this kind of scholarship. If you are awarded this kind of scholarship, you will get an exception for paying the tuition fees, which means that every month you have to pay 4,000, something like this one, for the tuition. If you can award this kind of scholarship, you don't need to pay this kind of money for the tuitions. And moreover, as mentioned before, I think attending the international conference is very important. So our university can offer the conference grant for the students. So you may have 2 times for the conferences, and every time you may get 10,000. Of course, usually, if you have already got one paper accepted by the top conferences, although you didn't granted for this kind of conference grant, and your supervisor suppose will support you for the conferences. And so until now, we have already finished the PhD application in Hong Kong, and I want to illustrate a little bit about the Hong Kong PFS application. So what is Hong Kong PFS? And the Hong Kong PFS means Hong Kong PhD Fellowship Scheme, and it was established by government of Hong Kong. So it is a very official website link. So you can click this kind of website so that you can know basic information about this kind of fellowship. So I just copy from this website. They told us that they want to recruit the brightest student worldwide to pursue PhD study in Hong Kong. So I want to mention this one is very competitive. So let's see the numbers. The website that said that they will support 300 PhD fellowships in this coming year. And in the last year, actually, our university got 51 fellows. So what does the 51 mean? Actually, in our department, we have 60 PhD in the last year. So you can see in our department, we have 60, but the whole university only have the 51 fellows. So this is very competitive. As far as I know, our department have 5 fellows in the past year. So only 5 students got.
Quite a few of them are our own undergraduate.
Yes, most of them are undergraduate.
From our own department.
No. I think 2 of them from our department, and they are undergraduate students, and they are local students, right? And also, I want to mention that in order to know the previous Hong Kong PFS information, then you can directly go to this website, and they list the Hong Kong PFS ID. Of course, we could not find the personal information, but at least we can see the Hong Kong PFS in our university or in different kind of universities. You can see the distributions. And so what you can get from the Hong Kong PFS actually compared with the previous salary, which is 17,500 every month. And for if you are awarded by the Hong Kong PFS, you can get 26,600 per month. And moreover, every year you will be awarded this kind of conference and research related travel allowance. And moreover, I want to say that actually in the RGC, this is a kind of a department, research department. So this fellowship is just for 3 years, but for our CityU, and our CityU will provide extra 1 month, because usually when you do the PhD study, you need 4 months, 4 years. So our university will pay the 4th year with the same stipend. And moreover, if you are awarded with the Hong Kong PFS, and especially if you are in the awarding our CityU, and you will be directly obtained the graduate study entrance scholarship. And this scholarship, I think it is very big, because it will cover the student tuition and on-campus accommodation fees in the first year. And so I want to see the selection criteria. So this selection criteria is not just done by myself, okay? I just copied from the official website. They said that you should have very academic excellence. You should demonstrate very good research ability and potential, and you should have very good communication and interperson skills, and also the leadership abilities. So based on my understanding, if you want to demonstrate your academic excellence, you should have a very high GPA, right? You should also have some kind of award. So please try to be active in the competitions. And moreover, I want to say that you need to have some research experience. It is better you have some research experience. And also, if you have some kind of publication, that will be very good. And moreover, I want to say that in this Hong Kong PFS applications, you have to submit the research proposal. I think this kind of research proposal can demonstrate some research abilities and potentials. And for the leadership part, I think it is better to have some extra curriculum activities. So I want to share my experience. So this is my experience, and I was awarded the Hong Kong PFS. I just show the examples, okay? And I obtained my PhD, my bachelor degree from the Northwestern Polytechnic University, which is ranked 985 with undergrad university. And my GPA is not very good, but I ranked the first in my major. And I obtained the national scholarship and merit student for 3 years. And when I the applications, I was the first author of 2 conference papers, and I also I have some co-author journal papers. And I used to be at administration position in the student union, and I was excellent volunteers of something. And moreover, I was told I maybe have a very good interview score. The reason is that because when I finished my interview, some other professor directly told me that you did a very good introduction of yourself. So I think maybe this is a very good point for me, which can support my communication and interperson skills. And so this is the application steps. In order to apply the Hong Kong PFS, you first need to go to the RGC website. And here, this is the website links. And you can direct, anyway, I will share the PowerPoint with you, and you can directly click this link so that you can go to this website to obtain the reference numbers before the December 1st this year. And after that, you need to submit the full application to CityU or any other university in Hong Kong to final submit your whole materials for the PhD. To be noted here that the first step is just to get a reference number, so that every time when you submit your full applications, you need to identify this kind of number. And as mentioned before, you only have 2 choices for this Hong Kong PFS submissions. For example, when I submit this kind of application, I just choose CityU HKEE and Hong Kong UEE as my first, as my choice. So although I got the offer from CityU HKCIS, but I didn't submit this kind of Hong Kong PFS application, so I only can get the regular PhD offer, but in the CityU HKEE, I directly got the Hong Kong PFS. And so I want to the procedures in the Hong Kong PFS in our department. So in order to, the first step is to contact the supervisors. And after that, you may finish the interview in our department. This is official interview. And usually we will finish the interview before the mid of December, because here I want to mention the Hong Kong PF deadline is December the 1st. So we will finish our department interview, and we will recommend these students with the high quality to the colleges. And the colleges will recommend Hong Kong PFS to the university, and finally the university will nominate the Hong Kong PFS to the government. And although the university nominates you maybe, but you may not be selected by the government, right? And but I want to mention here is that if you can recommend it by our department, you can definitely will receive the normal PhD offer. So which means that although you didn't obtain the Hong Kong PFS at this March, but you can obtain the normal PhD offer if you are excellent enough, if you are accepted by the professors. So please contact the supervisor first. And the last 2 slides, I just want to illustrate a little bit about the MSc application. And in our department, we have the 2 MSc programs, including the Electronics, Information Engineering, and Multimedia Information Technology. So to honest, I saw one question, they want to apply Big Data MSc. I think this one will be very suitable for you. And the application period is quite long, and you can submit your application now, and the application will end it at the next May. So you can directly click this kind of link to submit your MSc program. So I think the reason why you apply MSc in our department is that maybe you want to make your CV looks much more stronger. Maybe during the MSc year, you can conduct your research with some kinds of potential supervisor, and the supervisor may know you very well, and you may conduct some final MSc dissertation, and then you may have a very good luck chance to be accepted by the professor as a PhD student. Actually, I know several students who used to be MSc in our department and then to be the PhD in our department. And the most important thing for our MSc program is that we have a very good program, and they offer the summer internship, which means that they can spend 9 weeks to 13 weeks to go to international universities. As far as I know, they can directly go to NUS or NTU or other university around the world to conduct the research project. I think this is also a very good opportunity for the students to be accepted by the other universities, because you have this kind of program. You can work or you can conduct research with the professor in NUS. So maybe you have a large chance to be accepted by the professors in the NUS or other universities. So I think that's all for my introduction. I majorly introduced the PhD application in Hong Kong, and the Hong Kong PFS application and MSc application in our department. So thank you very much. And to be noted here, we have the feedback questionnaire. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I just want to emphasize again about the Hong Kong PhD fellowship. First of all, it's very competitive. Secondly, it's very good. It has a lot of support, much higher salary than normal PhD students. And thirdly, is that it's gettable. We do have cases of our EE student get the PhD, Hong Kong PhD fellowship. So if you are considering doing a PhD and you considering doing it in Hong Kong, I think this is a very good scheme to support your research. Okay, so I think we are open for questions, and you may just type your questions in this chat box. We have one question is from Lo Zhihao, is that PhD seems to have a higher admission requirement and smaller quota. It means that it is understandable why even students who want to eventually pursue a PhD go for a master instead. I agree. Yes, I think that's correct. A lot of people do that, but again, I think, and you're right that PhD admission has a higher requirement usually, and a smaller quota. That's also right. But again, I'm coming back to my criteria, right? I think the only reason you're doing the master program is because you think that can enhance your package. Right? So this is something that you should try to assess. Right? I think if you go to a really good master program from a very good university, that of course, and if you get a good GPA in the end, that of course helps. But it doesn't. It's not required to have that. It's not required to have that. And also, I think for PhD admission, I think all the reasons we're assessing all these things is trying to assess your research potential. So I think, as Dr. Yuan also mentioned, if you do an MSc and then you work with a professor there, then of course you can boost your research profile. Right? But you can also do that, for example, doing the RA, right, with doing the research assistant with a professor. Then you're doing full-time research. So that might even be better than taking a taught course-based master program. Right? So I think there's no standard answer here, but the important thing is that how you can improve your package here. Okay. And any other questions? We'll also make this video. I think we'll make this video available online, and also the slides probably. With the video, maybe we don't need the slides. Okay. Do we have more questions? It's a bit quiet today, I think. And you are also welcome to contact us if you have any further questions in any regards regarding the application, regarding other things, research, and other things. While you think you can continue to think about your questions, okay, got a follow-up question. Without provocations, what is considered good research experience? I think for undergraduate students, it's not really required to have publications. We understand that it's not, you're not everybody can get a publication, even if you do good research. But this can be reflected in your recommendation letter. So if you do some project with a professor, and he can write a very good letter for you, right? Or even if he knows someone in the other university that is taking students, and then he can directly recommend to. This is even better than a letter. He can just call out his friend and say, "Hey, I have a very good student here. This is the best student I've ever seen." That would be the best situation. So I think there are ways that you can prove your research ability. Of course, if you do have some publication, that would be good. But I think normally when we look at students, we take into account all the different situations. So, for example, if I have 2 applicants, one has master's degree, one doesn't, of course I wouldn't just simply compare the publication list of the 2. Right? So I would consider other things. And this is also why the GPA is important. GPA doesn't really translate to the research ability, but there is some correlation there. Okay, so while we wait for more questions, can I ask all of you to scan the QR code and give us some feedback about this, and also students here. Could you try to fill in the feedback questionnaire? We do want to get your, it should be a very short one. We hope to get your feedback. Whether we should do this again next year, or yes. Okay. So the 2 PFS are from our own department. Or, yes. So you do have, last year we have 2 students from RE department got into the PFS. Yes, and we might have students who got into PFS in other universities.
Oh, yes.
Right, so yes, so the total number might be more than that. So it's very competitive, but it's possible. It's not something that it's not possible. And I think they do like students from Hong Kong, from Hong Kong universities. So yeah, so I think that's a good option to think about. Okay. Hopefully you guys are working on the questionnaire. If you finish the questionnaire, could you type something there? Okay, thank you. And when you're finished, you can, I don't know, you should have some questions. No? Our talk is too good or too bad? Thank you. Okay, if no more questions, then maybe we stop here. And again, as I said, if you think about any other questions, feel free to send us emails about your question. Okay, so thank you all for joining us. Thank you.